What if I told you, you don't exist? No, this isn't a metaphor or some cheap philosophy. I mean, literally, the possibility that everything around you is nothing more than computer code. Every person you've ever loved, every place you've ever visited, every dream you've ever had could be just an absurd sequence of zeros and ones. Scary? Absolutely. But this is not just some movie plot. Scientists, philosophers, even tech billionaires like Elon Musk claim the chances that we're living in a simulation are enormous. And here's the craziest part. You may have even felt it. That strange sense that something just doesn't fit. Like the world around you is artificial, repetitive, almost programmed. Today, we're going to cross that boundary between reality and simulation to understand where this idea came from, what the greatest minds say about it, and most importantly, what this means for your life. If you love exploring mysteries like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way, YouTube will keep showing you more content that challenges everything you think you know. Now, take a deep breath and get ready, because after what I'm about to tell you, you may never see your reality the same way again. Since humans first started thinking about the world, a disturbing question has echoed through time. What if what we perceive as reality is just an illusion? Long before computers or science fiction, philosophers already suspected this. Plato, in his famous Allegory of the Cave, described prisoners chained inside a cave, only able to see shadows projected on the wall. And, never having seen the real world, they believe those shadows are reality. Centuries later, Descartes asked the same question, but in a different form. What if an evil genius is manipulating all our perceptions? He concluded that the only certainty we can have is, I think, therefore I am. And across the world, in ancient China, Zhuangzi woke up from a dream where he was a butterfly and couldn't tell, was he a man dreaming of being a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming of being a man? See, the idea that reality is an illusion transcends cultures and millennia. But now, we have something they didn't: technology. And precisely because of it, this hypothesis feels more plausible than ever. Nick Bostrom, one of the most influential philosophers today, proposed the famous simulation argument. If an advanced civilization can create simulations as realistic as life and is interested in doing so, then statistically, it's much more likely that we are the simulated characters, not the creators. And this idea is not just in books. Elon Musk stated that the odds we're living in base reality are 1 in billions. Neil deGrasse Tyson gives it a 50% chance. And Max Tegmark, a physicist at MIT, goes even further. He points out that our universe looks like a mathematical program. That's why, in this video, we're going to dive deeply into this topic. We'll explore its philosophical origins, the modern formulations, the scientific arguments, the spiritual interpretations, and of course, what all of this means for our existence. Because if we're really inside a simulation, what's left that is truly authentic about our experience? What do you think? Do you believe we're living in a simulation, or is all of this just technological paranoia? Leave your opinion in the comments. I'd really love to know what you think about this idea. So, if we're living in a simulation, who or what is simulating us? And above all, why? The first stop on our journey is philosophy. Because long before we had computers and algorithms, humans already carried a deep suspicion that what we call reality might be just a shell. Think about it. Imagine living your entire life chained inside a cave, like in Plato's Allegory. Your only view of the world is shadows projected on the wall, and you grow up believing that is all there is. Now, what if that's exactly how our existence works? Maybe our perception, limited by our senses, is equivalent to those shadows, and the real reality is something out there, unreachable, inaccessible, or even programmed. This doubt didn't stop with Plato. René Descartes, in the 17th century, went even further with his famous evil genius thought experiment. Imagine an extremely powerful being controlling all our perceptions. You think you're hearing my voice right now, maybe sitting in a chair. But what if all of this is just a sophisticated illusion generated by some entity to deceive you? Feel how that creates immense tension? If we can't trust even our own senses, what's left? And here comes your first existential premise. I think, therefore I am. But is thinking enough to prove we're outside a simulation? Or is it just what the simulation wants us to believe? And then comes Zhuangzi with that dream. Or was it reality? He dreamt he was a butterfly. Or is the butterfly now dreaming it's him? How many times have you had dreams so vivid that you woke up confused, unsure if they really happened? Maybe our entire lives are just a dream, a code, a programmed routine. This idea kept gaining strength. In the 20th century, Hilary Putnam modernized the dilemma. Imagine a brain in a vat, kept alive, fed electrical stimuli identical to those it would normally receive. That brain would believe it's living a normal life, with friends, loves, sufferings, and joys. But in reality, it's just an isolated organ, tricked by a computer. Terrifying, right? And the most unsettling part is that we can't, with absolute certainty, prove that we're not one of those brains in a vat. Let's pause here. Right now, take a deep breath and answer this honestly. How can you be sure that everything you're experiencing at this exact moment isn't just a stream of information coldly processed by some entity or system? Hard, isn't it? But hold on, it gets even more disturbing, because it's not just philosophy suggesting this possibility. Science does too. In the early 2000s, Nick Bostrom gave this dilemma a modern twist. The simulation argument is perhaps one of the most impactful and unsettling theories ever proposed in contemporary philosophy. In simple terms, he proposes 3 possibilities, and see if you can escape them. 1. Humanity will go extinct before reaching the technological capacity to simulate entire universes. 2. Even if it gains that capacity, advanced civilizations will have no interest in doing it. 3. Or we are, right now, inside a simulation. And if the first 2 are false, then the third is almost inevitable. Take a breath, because that reasoning is dizzying. And what makes it all more tangible? The evolution of our own technology. Think about it. Just a few decades ago, games like Pong were the peak of digital entertainment. 2 squares and a pixel moving on a screen. Today, we have photorealistic virtual environments, augmented reality, AI creating human faces indistinguishable from real ones. Now project this 100, 1,000 years into the future. Would it really be impossible to create entire universes with conscious beings living and believing they are real? And what if we are those beings? Elon Musk, when commenting on the simulation argument, was blunt. The chances we're in base reality are 1 in billions. In other words, he believes we are living in a simulation. Then comes Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of the world's most famous science communicators, saying there's at least a 50% chance. And physicist Max Tegmark points out something even more intriguing. Our universe looks like software. The laws of physics are strict, mathematical, like a programming code. Particles behave according to complex but predictable algorithms. So, wouldn't it be plausible to imagine that our universe is, in fact, an extremely advanced computational system? Now, maybe you're thinking, okay, but where are the glitches? Well, some scientists are actually trying to find them. Theories suggest that if we're in a simulation, there could be detectable artifacts, discrete limits in space-time, anomalous patterns in cosmic radiation, even subtle changes in physical constants. For example, the fact that we can't detect speeds faster than light could be a system limitation, like in a video game, where there are limits to processing information. Maybe the speed of light is, in our simulation, the equivalent of the maximum update rate. Ever thought about that? Another potential clue is in quantum mechanics. The famous uncertainty principle suggests that subatomic particles don't have a defined state until they're observed. Now, that sounds a lot like the system that renders information only when needed, just like in a game, where environments are processed only when the player gets close to save resources. So, answer me, could it be that the universe only materializes when you're looking? Disturbing, right? And there's more. Quantum entanglement. That phenomenon where 2 particles remain connected, regardless of distance, as if they instantly share information. How do we explain that? If we're in a simulation, there's no need for physical connection. Both particles can simply be processed by the same system unit, like 2 variables linked in the same code. And then it seems less strange, doesn't it? Now think about this. If we're indeed inside a simulation, another even more unsettling question arises. What is its purpose? Are we here for entertainment, to be studied, to evolve, or simply because the simulation was created by chance, with no greater purpose? And this is where philosophy, once again, meets science. Because even if we discovered that we are simulated, our experience still is real to us. David Chalmers, one of the leading philosophers of mind, says, even if we're in the Matrix, so what? It's not so bad. That is, whether we are or not just code, we love, suffer, create, connect. Our subjective experience remains valid, and perhaps that's what matters most. Now, I want you to think with me. If tomorrow it were proven without a doubt that we're living in a simulation, what would change in your life? Would you keep working, loving, dreaming? Or would everything lose meaning? That's the beauty and the terror of this hypothesis, because it forces us to look inward, to question our essence, and to realize that maybe we're just characters, but characters who feel, characters who seek purpose, even within a programmed system. And deep down, isn't that what we've always done? Since the caves, since the ancient philosophers, until now, in this very moment, trying to decipher whether we are real or just a game. So far, we've dived deep into the philosophy and science behind the idea that we might be living in a simulation. But what if I told you that, even without computers or algorithms, long before any physicist or programmer existed, many spiritual traditions already said, for millennia, that this world is an illusion? Yes, for many cultures, what we call reality was never considered the true reality. In Hinduism, there's the concept of Maya, the veil of illusion. The idea is that everything we perceive with our senses is merely a deceptive appearance, hiding the true essence of the universe, Brahman, the divine unity. Think about it. Isn't that practically the same structure as a simulation? A system that generates multiple forms and experiences, but behind it all hides a single true source. And spiritual enlightenment, in this context, would be like leaving the matrix, removing the veil of Maya, waking up, and perceiving the true nature of existence. Now, remember Neo in the Matrix, opening his eyes and seeing the real world for the first time? It's impossible not to notice the parallel. And this kind of idea also appears in Gnosticism, a mystical branch from the early days of Christianity. According to the Gnostics, the material world was created by an inferior being, the demiurge, an imperfect or even malevolent entity that trapped human souls in this physical, illusory world to keep them away from the true God, who is transcendent and unknowable. Look how impressive. The structure is almost identical to the simulation theory. A creator or programmer manipulating reality, keeping beings trapped until they discover the secret knowledge and manage to break free. In Gnosticism, this knowledge is called gnosis. In the Matrix, it's the red pill. And once again, the question that echoes: have various cultures throughout history intuitively sensed that there is something wrong with reality? Now let's bring that into the present. Even outside traditional religions, many modern thinkers view the world as an illusory or artificial structure. In Spiritism, for example, there's the idea that life on Earth is a test, a temporary stage, while true existence occurs in the spiritual realm. Many Spiritist scholars even say, yes, in a way, we live in a spiritual matrix. Here, the simulation wouldn't be generated by machines, but by God as a divine simulator, placing spirits to evolve through challenges and learning until they're ready to ascend. Can you see how, once again, the pattern repeats? A system, a purpose, a journey, and the need to awaken. Now, take a deep breath, because the inevitable question arises: what if these spiritual traditions are describing in mystical language the same phenomenon that today we try to understand through technology and science? What if Maya, the Matrix, Gnosis are just metaphors for the same underlying reality that we still don't fully comprehend? Perhaps this simulation theory is simply the contemporary and high-tech version of an ancient human intuition that we are, in some way, trapped. And here comes a crucial aspect: pop culture, because it was precisely through cinema, video games, and literature that this idea exploded into the collective imagination. When the film The Matrix premiered in 1999, the world was shaken by a chilling premise. All of humanity lived connected to a simulation created by machines, while their bodies were used as an energy source. Neo, upon discovering the truth, faces the choice: remain in the comfortable illusion or face the painful reality. This metaphor, so powerful, resonated deeply because deep down, all of us have felt that strange sensation that there's something more, something hidden, something they're not telling us. And The Matrix popularized many elements that we still use today to discuss this topic. Glitch in the Matrix, awakening, red pill. But it wasn't just The Matrix. Around the same time, films like The Truman Show brought a more emotional and psychological approach. Truman lives his life peacefully until he notices small failures, little glitches revealing the farce. His entire town, everyone around him, were actors. His whole life, a reality show. And when he discovers the exit, he chooses to leave, even without knowing what he will find. See the similarity? It's always the same cycle. The character lives in an illusion, discovers signs, faces fear, and chooses to break free. Now, answer me. If it were you, if you discovered that your entire life is a simulation, what would you do? Would you accept it, resigned, or try to find the exit? And is there even an exit? Perhaps, as philosopher David Chalmers suggests, it doesn't matter whether we're in a simulation or not, because ultimately, our subjective experience is real to us. We feel, love, suffer, create, and that regardless of whether we are code or atoms. But of course, not everyone agrees with the validity of this hypothesis, and here begin the criticisms and limits of the simulation theory. One of the main counter-arguments is it's unfalsifiable. That is, if the simulation is perfect, we will never be able to detect it. Therefore, the hypothesis can't be tested, so it doesn't belong in science, but rather in metaphysics. Physicist Lisa Randall, for example, is categorical. I think the probability that we're in a simulation is practically zero. She asks, why would an advanced civilization bother simulating beings like us? And that's an important point. For the simulation to be plausible, we must assume that, besides sufficient technology, a civilization would have the interest or need to create such simulations. But what if they don't? What if advanced civilizations simply have no interest in that? Or, as some versions of the so-called Great Filter suggest, maybe no civilization survives long enough to achieve such computational power. On the other hand, even if they do, would there be practical limits? Simulating an entire universe with all its details would require a computational capacity absurd. But some theorists argue that it wouldn't be necessary to simulate everything all the time. It would be enough to simulate what's perceptible. Like in a game, you don't need to render an entire city, only what the player is seeing. And then, remember quantum mechanics, particles that only collapse when observed, discrete limits in space-time. quantum entanglement. All of this could be signs of an optimized simulation. Now, here's something crazy. Physicist James Gates, studying equations that describe subatomic particles, found mathematical structures identical to error-correcting codes used in computers. When asked about it, Gates replied, "I can no longer say that people who talk about us living in a simulation are crazy. This means that, perhaps, at the very foundation of our reality, there are already signs that we are a computational system." And here, we return to the cycle, science and philosophy intertwining. But even if all this evidence exists, the big question remains, so what? If we're living in a simulation, what changes? Do we stop loving, dreaming, creating? Or do we simply keep living as conscious characters within a system we don't fully understand? Perhaps, as Max Tegmark says, what matters isn't whether we are simulated or not, but what we do with the time we have. And maybe that's the great lesson. Because in the end, whether real or simulated, what we have is now. This moment, this consciousness, this journey. And if, as the Gnostics, Hindus, philosophers, and physicists say, reality is indeed an illusion, then it's up to us to awaken. Or perhaps simply play the game as best we can. But what if the real simulation hasn't even started yet? What if everything we've discussed so far is just one superficial layer? Because there's another possibility, even more disturbing. And no, I'm not going to tell you now. This is an invitation. Keep exploring. Keep questioning. Go further. The next video that's about to pop up on your screen might be exactly what you need to dive even deeper into this journey. Or perhaps uncover another dimension of this same mystery. Because if life really is a game or a simulation, then maybe our mission isn't to break the code, but instead to play it masterfully, with awareness, with presence, and with that relentless curiosity that has always made us ask, what if none of this is real? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.